Stigma, A Path to Recovery. Hosted by Fredd Carroll and life coach Scott H. Silverman. A mental health awareness and addiction recovery podcast. Don't be ashamed of your story. It will inspire others. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Ending the Stigma, Path to Recovery. That's Scott H. Silverman. I'm Fredd Carroll today, and we have Chris. How do you say your last name? Chris Schirm?
Yep, you got it. Perfect.
Chris Schirm. We got Chris Schirm with us, but we want to mention first that today is World Suicide Prevention Day. So that's a big deal, and I think we'll spend some time talking about stuff like that, but we're going to talk about Chris first. So, Scott, you already know Chris, correct?
Well, you know, it depends on the audience I'm talking to. Chris is he's like a brother from another mother. He's, I can't even remember how he came into my life. I think he knocked on my door once years ago. He was selling candy for the homeless or something. And I brought him in for dinner and he said, I'm not really selling candy. I just like candy. So I get it at cost. Yeah. Chris and I go way back, and his mission that I've seen in life is pretty powerful. And he gets up every day like I do and wants to help others. And you were like that, Fredd, before you got a real job, and now you have a real job and you can only help others part-time now rather than full-time. That's
right. So Chris, where are you from? Where were you born, and where were you raised? In the same area?
I'm originally from Orange County, South Orange County. Now I'm out in South Riverside County, so Temecula, Marietta area. And but I spend a lot of time down in the San Diego region because I drive Uber. So the pay's a little bit better down there, and the people are nice and good weather.
So what is your story? What is it that you do as that Scott's referring to? What is your mission?
Okay. Well, there's two parts there, my story and then the mission. My story is a little bit unique, I guess, but very similar to a lot of other people. I was raised very well, had a lot of opportunities growing up. About about fourth grade, figured out I was gifted, so went into those type of classes. I did better in school. I was really struggling before then because I just would get bored. It was ADHD. So the Ritalin came in young, a lot of fractures with the parents and just in relationships in general in my early childhood, so junior high time. And then later on, I became sick with ulcerative colitis, supposedly ended up being Crohn's, had a surgery at 16 and a half. Ended up finishing high school very quickly just so I could get a job. And, it wasn't very nice having to do what I had to do with, high school. So that led into a pill addiction because they hadn't really figured out what the true illness was. It happened to be Crohn's, and they were just doing surgeries to try and save my life, honestly, but it had its downsides. And so I became very addicted to the pills. Fast forward about 15 years through, countless bad stories we all got. And I came to my bottom and decided that, I was going to reach out for help and just surrender that my life was unmanageable. I couldn't take care of it. And I needed a higher power to, help me with my life because basically it wasn't manageable. So that led me to rehab, where I just surrendered, went through the whole sober living process, all that. And, quickly picked up that service was a big part for me, that was a good way to keep me grounded, keep me humble, and keep me helping other people to where I had something to lose if I went back, and that just wasn't an opportunity or an option for me. So now I help people, whether it be just in a general sense of, somebody in my car that, is having a bad day. Like somebody the other day, I start off with, how's your day going? And they just say, okay. And it's the tone that's in the voice, that okay. And it's like, oh, are you sure? How's it really going? And just kind of joke with them and get them to smile. And, just kind of, you could tell she was having a bad day. So and told her, hey, make a game out of it. See if you can pick up on what somebody else is, see what their emotion is, and see if you can put a smile on their face. It might put a smile on your face. And quickly into the conversation. So it's helping people like that, but then going out and helping the homeless people, which is a very complicated issue. Services are complicated. It's very political now. And there's a lot of dynamics to it. It's a very individualized situation that gets very generalized. And so, I'm trying to be on the ground, but also I've tried to come up with other options that maybe are, necessary with the situation we got in how drastic it is.
Okay.
And Chris, you do all this right now, what you've just described, and we'll go in more detail as time goes on here. You do all that as a volunteer, right? You're not paid to do any of this.
No. Yeah, just volunteer.
Right. No, and you give of your time and your talent and your treasury, because I know I've heard you talk about bringing water, bringing food, and helping people, and sometimes getting in a hotel. And then you just recently put somebody on a Greyhound bus and send them home to their family, or at least help facilitate that?
Yeah. Kind of got him, a couple days sober through a hotel, and, got him through the shaky process, got him on a bus and got him back to where he could actually get some medical care, so that if he chose, down the road to really pursue the, getting off and getting sober and, abstinence, that he'd at least have the opportunity to do that. Being in a state, a lot of people get shuffled out here and they won't even have the resources. So they'll be dependent upon the missions and other stuff like that. And that's not necessarily the greatest catalyst to get out of the situation. Hence why we have a huge chronic homeless population. Is the services are there to mitigate the problems, but not as a solution, in my opinion.
I sometimes take it even a little step further. Sometimes the perceived solutions to mitigate the problems are more what I see government or the county or the city's municipalities leadership doing, because if they don't do it, there's a problem. So they do something. Right. I call it kind of like shut up, resources. I just today in the paper, I don't know if you've had a chance to hear about it yet. You may already know it, but there's a new 50-bed facility opening up in Point Loma. It's the old Pier 1 Imports store that's vacated, and they're going to open up a treatment center for people who are homeless, but they're not going to mandate that they get treatment. So it's kind of like, we're going to have this here for you, and we certainly want you to take advantage of it, but it's not going to be mandated. And that's kind of the way I read it in the newspaper. Yeah. And they're going to put, millions, 1.7 million towards it, which is a significant chunk of change to hold, only 50 beds, but I don't know how often they'll turn them. And then there was no real discussion about what happens once somebody walks in, hopefully gets help, gets stabilized, because if they go right back out to where they were, as you know, Chris, they'll just be impacted by the same thing that kind of, drove them to what got them in the front door, people, places, and things that happen. So, I've seen it a lot longer than you have, because I'm older than you are, but I think government right now, I think we're looking to government to try to fix things. And I think government's clearly showing us that, unfortunately, on a localized level, we're going to have to do something as a community. We just can't depend on in our case, the county supervisors, the mayor's office, the coordinated efforts. In my opinion, they fall short of what is a minimum of need. So, I really encourage you to keep going and doing what you're doing. And one day you'll be a high-paid homeless czar caught up in the system, but you'll have a grassroots experience about what you see, what you hear, and what people are actually experiencing. So you can really, I'm confident you'll be able to really share some great insight and practical experience, which will be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's what resonates most with people is, I do have experience. Like you can talk all you want and sound really good, and you might have all the information, but were you there? Did you actually go through it? Can you relate to somebody? The relatability, that's that. And I agree. If somebody can go back out, it almost does more harm, because the overdose rate is probably higher among people that do some rehab, clear up their system, and then go out and use the same amount. It's detrimental to the body. And to mandate something that, think about it. The addiction is like it's a disease of denial. So why would they say, oh yeah, sign me up for the resources of rehab? I mean, it'll happen every once in a while, but to not mandate that, I mean, if you don't want to mandate them going to, you know, financial school or something, hey, great, that's an option in life. But living a clean, healthy, sober life and not being, you know, putting jabs in your arm on the street next to feces, I mean, that's just kind of, that seems to me like not too much of an optional situation. I mean, I would think if they had a little clarity of mind, they would go, yeah, I don't really like that. So that's why I don't think that you can make it an optional thing for somebody that's going to choose the wrong option. You know,
Right.
Force doesn't necessarily work, but encourage them, show them the light rather than just being like, hey, whatever.
It's kind of like, you know, you don't have to tell someone to do something, but if someone's got decision anxiety, they're suffering from untreated trauma, they're already depressed, you know, their self-esteem has been, you know, withdrawn, sucked away or taken away, or they gave it away, to try to say, look, here's an option A and here's an option B. And then you walk away. I mean, I can remember once one of the drop-in centers here in our community they had what they called a job program. So one day, because that was my specialty, was helping people get jobs, I walked over and I said, I want to learn more about your job program. Oh, well, we have the classified ads over on the wall. Help wanted. I mean, it's like, what? You know, so they were able to say, well, we have a job. We offer people all kinds of leads. Just, it's right there on the wall, you know.
More appropriate job navigator, but not a job program to where you're actually teaching trades. You know, that's what I want to do, is build something where people can learn the trades, get the education, get the therapy, you know, all that stuff that they need, and give them a quality of life to something that they could maybe build out and have appreciation for, and you know, fill a lot of the voids that are there. Like, there is a housing crisis, a housing affordability crisis, a lack of, you know, free quality drug treatment that's not based on insurance but based on an illness, and is free to and widely accessible to anybody who wants it across the nation. Like, some of these things, and like you said, I don't think government's the answer. They haven't been the answer for 40, 50 years. I don't know what magically has changed overnight that would be counter to what the eyes can see. So I truly believe it's a community effort that needs to be, you know, privately funded, and hopefully, you know, a big in-source of information and everything. It's not one person going to do millions.
So Chris, tell us and share with those, you know, we don't always have a lot of viewers that come in. Actually, we have our main viewer here today, the guest. But one of the things that Fredd does a really good job of doing is pushing out on social media what we say here and what we do here. So share with our audience what got you involved and how you got involved with helping others. When you think about, you know, look, you had your own trials and tribulations, the idea, you see a lot of people say, well, you know, I got myself, you know, I don't have time I got to take care of me, but you've made a decision, it seems like, to really help others. So what was it, you know, what was that pivot point? What was it, that aha moment, that burning bush, turning the corner, flipping the coin, whatever it was that kind of kicked it off for you to want to be of service to others?
You know, I would have to say it was a lot in my upbringing that you know, you look out for other people. You don't live a selfish life. I didn't take that to heart necessarily, but I knew the principle, and it was hitting bottom. Really, it was just hitting the complete bottom where my medical had completely deteriorated. I couldn't get off the stuff. I was living in a car with an alcoholic at 2 a.m. I mean, it was completely dysfunctional. And I surrendered right there, like in the way that I told my higher power that I already knew, but had gotten very disconnected from over the years. You saved me, buddy. I will dedicate everything to you. And I'm human. I knew that wasn't going to be a 24/7 thing, that I would be flawed. But the great thing about that was I knew that would be acceptable on a human level from my higher power. So it was really about just breaking and wanting a chance to free my mind. My mind was the biggest thing. Like, being in an addiction is the most horrible thing for your mind. Your mind feels like it's trapped, because a lot of times your body works work's okay, or it's just your mind. You're in a prison. You're in a prison held on by these drugs, and so as a freedom of that, I just decided that there's a big need of people that don't have the opportunities like I do, and there's a big void. And yeah, I could have moved on with my life, but it wouldn't have felt right to be selfish in my recovery. Like, that kind of seemed counterproductive to everything everybody was telling me. Was to just move on and be happy with my life. That's a great thing, but that was just kind of the start of where do you go from there.
So that kind of got you into it. So what keeps you going? I mean, what is it that, you and I talk a lot. Some weeks we talk every day. Some days you stop, you won't stop talking. And, the good news is I resemble that. So we get along just fine. And by the way, you're probably one of the most articulate writers on my text stream I've ever seen. And you punctuate, and you have good semantics, and you spell everything correctly. And I'm really impressed. I mean, clearly you're much brighter than I am. But what is it each day that helps you not only engage, but want to stay engaged? What keeps you in the fight, so to speak?
Man, that's a really good question. Kind of got me off guard like that. There's a lot of things I try and, I try and make life a game. That's kind of what I told that girl was, how can I impact somebody in life in a positive way? What things that can I find that normally people would just look right over? Also seeing the smiles on people's faces when you bring them water, or you show up a month later after you brought them the water, and they're like, oh my gosh, and they're just happy to see you, and they tell you, since that day this whole area has just come together and stuff like that. Those type of stories keep it going. A lot of it is my faith, though. Knowing that the problem is far from being solved, and my higher power, just being really grateful for my recovery, because there is a lot of trouble in this. This is not an easy thing to take on. It's not like, hey, I'm gonna go build a house from raw ground, and there's only so much that could go wrong. You're dealing with humans here, where they have their own inhibitions. There's free will. You don't want to step on that. So there's a lot of frustration, but yeah, that's a good question. And I probably have to think a little bit more on that, but I would say my faith and, the good stuff you do see that happens, knowing that, it's all human. I failed so many times. We need better services, better opportunities. And that's not there. Basically, the problem isn't solved. If I had to say one thing, the problem isn't solved. That's why I'm still in it. Yeah.
So, and I know geographically, share where you've been in the last 6 or 9 months. Cause whenever you pop up, you're like, hey, I'm in Riverside. Hey, I'm in Venice. Hey, I'm in San Diego. Hey, I'm in Nevada. I mean, where have you been to bring your experience, strength, and hope? Because you've been, if we should get you a motorhome or something to make it easy, you run an office, you can run your own podcast, you can bring people in to eat, use a bathroom. But so where have you been? Because I know you've traveled a lot of places and spent a lot of time seeking knowledge. Where have you gone? Tell people.
Really all over Southern California. The beauty of this was I was already an Uber driver before I got recovered. Probably don't want to hear that, but it was whatever. I've been all over Venice, basically LA, West Side to the San Fernando Valley, San Gabriel Valley, out to maybe Redlands, and then down to San Diego, Orange County, everything included. Most of my time though is in San Diego. LA, it's just different. The homeless out there, the whole homeless scene out there, between the advocates, I mean, you have a lot of just strife out there. And so I try and stay away from that. I'm not big on, I want to come up with solutions rather than just beat the problem over the head. So in a homeless way, I try and stay away from LA, but just all over the place. I like to get people's experiences, whether it be, the rural area or the urban area. People's experiences are much different in, the failings of the system, whether that be like education or different things. I like to hear that different people's story, because that gives me a better idea of where do people come from, where are the gaps that they lack, and where would the solutions be to fill those gaps so that people can have more prosperous, fulfilling lives. And if I only know my own story, it's a little bit hard for me to help a wide swath of people. I would only be able to help people just like me. So
yeah. So when I was doing some research, just Googling basically homelessness and help for homeless, it looks like the majority. So New York City is number one on the list for homeless. And then it was LA, San Diego, San Francisco, all the Californias,
right.
So with it being, and the numbers are large in New York City and California compared to the rest of the United States. So are they starting there? Is there any solution to the problem starting from those points, since those are the big ones?
LA's solution, as far as I know, is Prop Triple H, stuff like that. It's just a housing, a housing initiative. That's the primary thing. When you get into more service related stuff, that seems to be coming from the private sector and nonprofit. Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be that the government level in the state of California is just pushing the housing.
Yeah, and they're not solving the problem, in my opinion, without going through the mental health program of it, because although it does claim from my research that the number one reason somebody's homeless is job loss is the number one, but the number two very close behind was mental health or addiction. And it's got to balance out there. I still think mental health is the number one, because I can't imagine somebody that becomes homeless can get better in the next year rather than worse. They only get worse, correct? You don't see people getting better.
Self-resolving is pretty rare within homelessness. I almost say that very rarely is it just one thing. Most often it's a combination of a couple of things: a job loss plus a traumatic experience, or an addiction plus a mental illness, or a job loss plus an addiction or something.
Or a divorce,
or a divorce. There's a list of 100 stuff, but combined a few of those. One off the bat usually doesn't happen that way unless it's a job loss. That would probably be the one caveat to that. That could send you into it. I don't know. It's just, you got to deal with the underlying stuff, and it's not always going to be mental illness or drug addiction or a job loss. What if it's the guy never had a job, never got education, he hasn't finished 6th grade? Like, that's the underlying thing that led to the selling drugs and using drugs and mental illness of living on the street. Those weren't there before he should have been in school. That kid should have been in school learning something, so they actually had the opportunity to not fall into that trap.
Right.
There's a whole list of things that can contribute to it. And when I like to, as a solution-based person, I see one of the things I'm hearing a lot about, I don't know if you're hearing this, Chris, or not, is one of the largest, fastest growing populations of homelessness is being forecast over the next 3 to 5 years. And I don't know how much COVID played with this. It may have, the economy shifting because of quarantine and disposable income as seniors, because, to your point, you can have a steady income, a source of income. May not be jobs. It could be, Social Security. It could be retirement. Could be veteran benefits. It could be, an estate from family members who have expired. But if you start factoring in new expenses like rent going up 40, 50%, A, B, if you pick up some sort of a self-medicating habit and you need resources for that, you're going to lose your housing. And just recently, the federal government which at some point everything has to sunset when it comes to benefits. Otherwise, you just keep printing money. The unemployment piece for almost 9 million people ceased. And, the fallout from that is going to be, in my opinion, going to contribute at every single level. And one of the things I personally really resent, the point in time count that they do nationally, they started doing that because that's a way that they were able to establish a per capita homeless per population for 1,000 people to earmark federal money to be allocated to the states to allocate to the counties. And most counts are off dramatically. We don't know what the percentage is, but I've never met anybody who's been out of work, homeless, in a shelter that wanted to say, hey, please count me. I mean, it's not like they run the lines to check off a box. It's volunteers who go out at 4:00 in the morning once a year, I believe, maybe twice a year now, once a year, I think. And then from that count, the feds use that as the criteria, which is how I think the Housing First model really got created, because they asked everybody, what do you want more than anything? Well, a place to live. Well, the follow-up questions weren't there. Well, how would you afford it? And if we were able to subsidize you, what part could you kick in? Would you go back to work? Would you like to go back to school? And what would that look like? And how do you sustain yourself while you're doing all that to get to self-sufficiency? And those are not part of the practicum that I see cities, like you said, Fredd, like New York or even LA. And you've heard me share it, Fredd, and I know Chris knows this. 50% of the homeless are in California. I mean, in California's one of its biggest issues right now is making sure we have enough money to get the marijuana distributors legalized and licensed so they can sell marijuana. We put more money towards that, in my opinion, than helping people get into treatment for mental health issues, behavioral health issues, suicide, ideation, and drug addiction. And right now, until we get past this friggin', recall the governor thing next week, everyone's been focused. And I say everyone, I don't mean the population in general. I mean all the thought leaders, supposedly, and the legislative leaders and the business people, because politics is driving that agenda. And I don't mean this politician or that politician. I mean politics in general. It's the way our system is set up. I mean, look at what just recently happened in the last 48 hours. The president of the United States has mandated that everybody who has a company over 100 people, they have to be vaccinated or tested. And the pushback right now from one political party is, you shouldn't tell us what to do. I mean, I get that concept, but you know what? By not doing it, it's impacting others. Like the impaired driver analogy. If you want to drink and drug, that's your business. But don't get behind, a 1-ton vehicle moving 60 miles an hour when my family and my friends and my colleagues are on the same freeways. Stay at home, stay safe, take an Uber, get a Lyft, do something, but don't expose us to things like that. So that's my argument around that particular issue. But I just find that, it's out of control in LA. And, you mentioned about housing. I think the goal was to put in the last 5 years, 10,000 units together for housing. And they've built, I believe, 800 in 5 years. Right. And now they say the cost of putting together an affordable housing unit in the downtown LA area, basically referred to as what, Chris?
Skid Row, which is obviously not a very attractive area for investors or banks, but still Skid Row. They're saying today, this was just the president of the rescue mission in LA. He's been doing this 35 years. He goes, it now requires approximately $1 million to acquire the unit, to refurbish the unit and get it occupant ready. $1 million. So if you think about that, what would it cost to house the 50,000 homeless that are downtown? And if they promised everybody a home in LA and they said, we're going to have it for you in X amount of time, I don't know how many billions that is at $1 million a unit. Imagine how many other social service providers across the country would put their homeless caseload on buses to come to LA. So there's always that side too, because anytime they open up a new shelter in this community, it gets national news, which everyone beats their, yay, look at us. And then people who, come here because they don't want to live in freezing cold weather. And yeah. I get that. So it's kind of I call it the social service loop. I call it a vicious circle. And actually, what are the purest definitions of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Yeah. Nailed it.
Yeah.
So that's my rant. That's my rant, Fredd.
Yeah. Well, listen, before we end on this and stuff, what could we do since we can't solve this on a national level in any way? What could we do individually when we come across somebody that's homeless? What is the best way to deal with that?
Wow. On an individual person level that's not like really geared for it.
No, what you can do, Chris, Fredd, Scott. I mean, is that what you're saying,
Right.
Fredd? If we were to, if we walk down the street and someone says, "Hey, you got any spare change? I'm hungry." What can we do?
I stay away from the money thing. I try and keep like waters, granola bars, stuff like that. Have something in a baggie, and when you're going by, just kind of hold it out the window, and they'll put their hand out and just pull your hand back, put it in their hand very gently, and that type of stuff. There's unfortunately there's not a whole lot that the average person, in my mind, can do. One, you're putting yourself at risk, depending upon the situation. You're probably not going to fully know that, the ones that are going to creep up on you, until you're knee deep in it. So, I'd love to help people. For people to help people, I'm a little lost, and I don't want to send people down a path that could potentially lead someplace to them getting hurt. I'm just a little leery of.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's a couple things I would suggest. First, and I know you're thinking of this, and you know this, Chris. You just maybe didn't want to push it out there, but you look someone in the eye and you say hello, and you acknowledge them as a human being. And look, Chris, remember that person a couple of weeks ago? I think I told Fredd about it. That they called me. Yeah. And I answered the phone because I do that, and then I referred them to you, and then I got filleted and physically threatened. But that was kind of a learning opportunity. But I would still answer the phone. It wouldn't matter to me who it is. I'm going to answer the phone. But they were very upset, and I go, "I have an expert I'm going to put you in touch with." And they go, "What kind of expert is this?" They didn't fix anything. They, like, what do you want them to do? Buy you a car and get you a condo on the water? And I said,
all the problems. That's a problem.
That was a cross-border problem too. That was a very interesting one.
Yeah,
we got to share that one. So those are the kind of basic things that people can do as far as solving the problem. Getting informed, educating yourself, taking a look at what works. There are some communities around the country, Fredd, that have actually, I don't want to say they've done well. I want to give them some kudos for that. And they've tried to move in the right direction, and they have a coordinated effort. I mean, Florida, I was on a conference call with sober living providers, but it wasn't just sober living providers. It was state legislative representatives, it was local congressional people, it was city council, and they had a statewide initiative, and they were all meeting together. So they had state, county, and local and federal resources, whether it's leverage or potential policy changes, and they were talking to each other. I got invited to be there, and I was upset they didn't introduce me. I thought, God almighty. I sat there for an hour and a half, and no one said, "How do you do?" But they had a tight agenda, but it's a statewide initiative. And what caused that was all of the body brokering going on in the treatment centers in Florida. Mm-hmm. And, most of the people that were caught, if they didn't go to jail and they had the idea, they've kind of replicated everything they used to do in Orange County. So now we've got that infrastructure there. So there's bad people doing bad things out there, but there's also a lot of great people doing good things. And I think Chris is certainly one of them.
Yeah. And I agree that it's nice to finally meet Chris, and because he's such a constant part of our show, I figured we'd bring him on and talk about that. Yeah. But I do want to move the show into the suicide prevention part before we end.
Go.
And just let people know that it is an important thing. I'm not a big fan of these individual days, even though they do create a lot of income for places and stuff. But we all know we're not fools. This is a full year program. This is a 365 day, 24-hour a day problem. It's not just today. So I'm very passionate about it. Suicide prevention. I know Scott is, I'm sure you are too, Chris. And it's something that is I don't see it changing for the better in any way. It's just not changing enough. And I think a lot of it has to do with the stigmas, us still labeling people as crazy just because they have issues, or dismissing drug addicts as less than human, and not listening to people. And I'm guilty of it too. I've been there. When a friend you get the cry wolf type friend that constantly, and you just get numb to it. Eventually you stop paying attention to him, and then he finally does it and you feel guilty, and that's what suicide is. That's my main message, is suicide really does harm the people left behind a lot more deeply than the person will ever know. There's so much guilt. Somebody always feels guilty for that person's loss. And I just want to make sure people are aware that they could use the suicide prevention hotline, which is 1-800-273-TALK. 8255 is the numbers. It's available. It's easy to use. They're there to help. And if they can't call them, of course, 911 if it's an emergency first.
Yeah.
But what do you got to say about it, Scott? Anything specific?
Well, this is National, Recovery Awareness Month. This is also National Mental Health Month, and suicide prevention's got its, a day, which is kind of the idea to put the spotlight on it. And you're absolutely right. And right now suicide across this country is up. It's interesting. San Diego just put out some data and said it's on the decrease, but I don't know if they put overdoses or accidental overdoses into the suicide range, because it's not into the definition of suicide. I can remember they were trying to get the definition of what homelessness right, and how often they changed that just to make sure that they were, getting the right definition. So they were politically correct and engaging those who needed help, and they weren't stigmatizing it. But I think, to your point, Fred, we have to stop worrying about the stigma. We have to raise our hand and say, I have a friend, I have a family member, they need help. I don't know how to help them. Because the person who really needs the help, they don't always put their hand up until it's too late. And to your point, there's this, saying, I belong to that club. I tried to take my own life. And I remember my mom used to tell me how selfish suicide would have been, meaning she said, your life will be over and we'll all have to live with the pain if you take in your own life. And you know what? You're a pretty nice kid. And there's no reason why we're unwilling. We're not unwilling to do whatever it takes to support you. And I think everyone's got somebody somewhere. And if there isn't somebody somewhere, there's some group out there that's willing to embrace you and give you the help. And if you think about it, 330 million people, if each one of us helps somebody, we probably could solve a lot of problems. Or at least the person with the problems who think they have unsolvable problems would realize they have a friend, they have a mentor, they have an advocate, they have somebody who's willing to at least take some time to do whatever they can within their frame of influence to help change their lives. Because it's preventable. It is preventable, and it's treatable, and there's always help and hope.
Yeah, and there is you're a good example of this, that there is enough reason to live. It can get better. I'm not going to say it does get better. It can get better. There is help out there. There's ways to get out of. Most often or not, especially when it's a young kid, it's usually just a bad day, a bad moment.
Perfect.
And you could get through it. I'm reminded of, I have a friend who posted a lot today because she lost her son to suicide. And I'm familiar with the story, and it's got a strange story. Basically, this kid was 18 years old. He was a great kid. He was, average student and everything. And he got in trouble for, it was basically a statutory thing. A girl that was 15, he was 18. Her parents ended up taking him to court. It turned out she was with 3 other guys that night, but they were all under 18. He was the only one 18 or older. And when he was charged, which was only a 6-month charge, but he was going to have to register as a sex offender, which meant he wouldn't be able to ride his BMX bike at the local BMX track because it's a park. And that was part of the reason he ended his life. He couldn't live with the thought of not being able to go to the skate park. And it sounds so simple, but that's how it was such a big deal to him, you know. And I'm not going to get into the semantics of whether he was right. Of course, he did something wrong. That's fine. But we all have done something wrong. So I do want to mention that I stumbled across this quick little quote, and it says, when you have a friend that's going through a personal storm, instead of being a weatherman and spreading the news, try being an umbrella and cover them with love. So I thought that was important for today, and it makes sense for a lot of the things we're talking about. And I think that's going to end the show, I think, Scott, unless you got anything else to add.
What is it you always say to us, Fredd, when we go to wrap up the show? But before you do that, Chris, thanks for coming today, showing your face, taking time. And I think it's taken you about 6 months to get comfortable doing this. And was it that hard? Did it hurt that much? Did it feel good?
It felt good. It wasn't that hard. It's more of a psychological thing. It's, you know, it's the biggest battles we face are probably in our head. So it's, you know, and once you do it once, it's like, oh, it wasn't that hard. Now I like it. Now I'm going to enjoy it and do it more. So
yeah. And then you can flip this over to your friend up in Venice. What's his name? Is it German? Is that his name? The guy that does
German in Venice. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah. So you can send him this and go, hey, buddy, I'm on a podcast now. How about you? So,
yeah, I'll send him a little link.
all right. So, Fredd, what is that you always say to us every week?
Well, it's you that says it, but I could repeat it. It's, if nobody has told you that they love you today, I love you.
We love
you. And that's a Scott quote. Also, make sure everybody's going over to Apple or Spotify. Ending the Stigma is available at both of them. We take this live show and I edit it together and make it a podcast so other people could hear it on different formats. I know not everybody's available at the hours we do this. I have a new show starting, Scott. An all-new adventure begins October 4th, the Head of Fredd show. It's a little more of a comedy-based show, but it's still mental health. It has some mental health aspects to it. And I guess that's it. Do you have anything to push, Chris? You got anything you want to tell people?
No, just be happy, be healthy. If you know, the 3 hardest words, like Scott always says, I need help. They're, you know, they might be heavy words, but go ahead and say them and see what happens. I did, and my life's been amazing since. So, you know, don't be fearful to say 3 words that could change your life.
Okay, so that's it. That's it for Ending the Stigma. I'm Fredd Carroll. That is Scott H. Silverman and Chris Schirm. And we will see you again soon. Goodbye, everyone.